In the fable, The Dog and Its Reflection, a dog carrying a bone receives it from a butcher and crosses a bridge over a still river. Mistaking its own reflection for another dog with a larger bone, the greedy dog drops its own bone to snatch the imaginary one, only to find itself swimming and then scrambling out of the water, hungry and sad. The story's moral is that greed can lead to losing everything, and one should be content with what they have. The story, A Bone and a Butcher. A dog receives a juicy bone from a butcher and sets off to eat it in peace. It was a magnificent prize, a reward for patience, perhaps, or simply a kind gesture from the town's butcher, known for his generosity towards the local animals. The dog, its tail wagging with immense pride and anticipation, held the bone firmly in its jaws. This was not just any scrap. It was a substantial, meaty bone, promising a long and satisfying chew. The dog's sole intention was to find a secluded spot far from the prying eyes and potential challenges of other dogs, where it could savor its treasure undisturbed. The world seemed to shrink to the single glorious purpose of enjoying this meal. With a determined trot, it left the bustling marketplace behind, its thoughts filled with the delicious prospect ahead. The weight of the bone was a comforting presence, a tangible symbol of its good fortune. The dog pictured a quiet corner in a field or a shady spot under a large oak tree, where it could gnaw and crunch to its heart as content, the flavors exploding with every bite. The journey to this perfect spot was as much a part of the ritual as the meal itself, a parade of one, celebrating a small but significant victory in the daily struggle for survival and comfort. Each step took it further from the noise and competition of the town and closer to its private feast. The sun was warm on its back, and a gentle breeze rustled the leaves, creating a perfect afternoon for a well-deserved treat. The dog felt a sense of profound contentment, unaware that this feeling was about to be tested in the most unexpected way, turning its moment of triumph into a harsh lesson. Crossing the bridge, the dog encounters a narrow footbridge over a quiet river or stream. The path ahead led across a rustic wooden bridge that spanned a clear, slow-moving stream. The water below was as smooth as glass, undisturbed by any current, perfectly mirroring the sky and the trees that lined its banks. For the dog, this bridge was merely a means to an end, a simple obstacle to cross on its quest for a peaceful dining location. It stepped onto the wooden planks with confidence, its paws making a soft, rhythmic tapping sound. The structure was old but sturdy, and the dog felt no hesitation as it proceeded. The bridge was narrow, just wide enough for a single person or animal to pass at a time, which added to the sense of solitude. On either side, the lush green banks of the stream sloped gently down to the water's edge, dotted with wild flowers and tall reeds. The air was filled with the gentle hum of insects and the distant song of birds, a tranquil soundtrack to the dog's journey. It was a picturesque scene, one of pastoral peace and simplicity. The dog paused for a moment midway across, perhaps to catch its breath, or simply to take in its surroundings before continuing. The water below was so still and inviting, a perfect, unbroken surface. It was in this moment of pause, this brief interlude in its determined march, that the pivotal event of the story would unfold. The dog, still clutching its precious bone, happened to glance down, drawn by the serene beauty of the water or perhaps by a flicker of movement on its shimmering surface. This simple, innocent act of looking down would set in motion a chain of events driven by a powerful and destructive impulse. The bridge, a symbol of connection and passage, was about to become the stage for a lesson in loss and regret. The reflection, looking down, the dog sees its reflection in the clear water, appearing as another dog with a bone. In the mirror-like surface of the stream, an image stared back. It was another dog, identical in every way, with the same determined look in its eyes and, most importantly, a bone held firmly in its mouth. The reflection was so clear, so vivid, that the dog did not for a second recognize it as its own. It saw a rival, another canine that had somehow appeared in the water beneath the bridge. This was not just any dog. This was a competitor, and its presence was an immediate threat to the security of its own prized possession. The dog's mind, simple and direct, processed the visual information literally. There, in the depths of the stream, was a second dog, and this second dog possessed a bone. The stillness of the water created a perfect, undistorted illusion. Every detail was replicated with stunning accuracy. The color of its fur, the posture of its body, the way its muscles tensed around the bone. The reflected world was a perfect duplicate of the real one. The dog stared intently, its initial curiosity quickly morphing into something else. It was a primal reaction, an instinct to assess a potential threat. Its ears perked up, and a low growl may have rumbled in its chest. The sight of the other dog didn't just register as a presence, it registered as a challenge. The peaceful journey was abruptly interrupted by this unexpected encounter. The quiet solitude the dog had sought was shattered by the appearance of this watery doppelganger, and the focus shifted from enjoying its own bone to evaluating the one held by the other. Greed takes over. The dog, in its greed, believes the reflection holds a better, larger bone. As the dog continued to stare at its reflection, a deceptive trick of perception began to work on its mind. The water, with its slight ripples and the way it refracted the light, made the reflected bone appear larger, juicier, and altogether more desirable than the one it already possessed. What was a perfect illusion a moment ago now became a distorted and tempting fantasy. The dog's own bone, the one it had been so proud of just moments before, suddenly seemed inferior. The bone in the water looked magnificent, a feast fit for a king of dogs, while its own now felt like a mere consolation prize. This is where simple observation turned into a virus. The seed of greed, planted by this optical illusion, began to sprout and grow with astonishing speed. The dog was no longer content with its considerable fortune. The desire for more, for what it perceived as better, began to consume its thoughts. All logic and reason were abandoned, replaced by an overwhelming, irrational urge to possess that other, superior bone. The thought process was swift and decisive. Why should I be satisfied with this bone when a much better one is right there for the taking? The contentment it had felt just minutes ago evaporated like morning mist, replaced by a burning envy. It completely forgot the peaceful meal it had been anticipating. The new all-consuming goal was to acquire the treasure held by the dog in the water. The dog's body tensed, its muscles coiling in preparation for action. Its eyes were fixed on the illusory prize, its mind clouded by a singular, powerful emotion: greed. It was a classic case of the grass being greener on the other side, or in this case, the bone being bigger in the water below. The attempt to snatch, the dog opens its mouth to take the other bone, which causes its own bone to fall into the river. Acting on its greedy impulse, the dog made a fatal miscalculation. Convinced that it could easily overpower the other dog and claim its superior prize, it decided to act. To snatch the other bone, it would first need to intimidate its rival, perhaps with a fierce bark. It drew in a breath, its mind set on its aggressive plan. It opened its jaws wide, preparing to let out a ferocious growl to scare the other dog into dropping its magnificent bone. But the moment its mouth opened, the inevitable happened. The real, tangible bone it had been holding so securely was released. It slipped from its teeth, hung in the air for a fraction of a second, and then fell with a distinct plop into the quiet stream below. The sound broke the silence of the afternoon, a small but definitive punctuation mark to its foolish act. The bone sank quickly, disappearing into the depths of the water. As it fell, the ripples it created distorted and then shattered the reflection. The image of the other dog and its tempting bone vanished in the swirling water as if it had never been there at all. The illusion was broken, and the greedy dog was left staring into the disturbed surface of the stream, its mouth empty. The very action it took to gain more resulted in the immediate loss of what it already had. The plan, so clear in its greedy mind, had backfired in the most direct and immediate way possible. It was a moment of shocking, instantaneous consequence. The prize was gone, the rival had vanished, and the dog was left with nothing but the folly of its own actions. Loss and realization. The dog finds itself swimming and struggling to get out of the water. Once on shore, it realizes the foolishness of its greed and that it has lost its prize. In a panic, seeing its precious bone sink and the other dog disappear. The dog may have leaped into the water in a desperate, futile attempt to retrieve its lost meal. The cold shock of the river would have been immediate, its fur quickly becoming waterlogged and heavy. The struggle was real. It was no longer about a fantasy bone, but about survival. Thrashing and paddling, it fought against its own weight and the unfamiliar element, its mind now cleared of greed and filled only with the instinct to get back to solid ground. After a frantic struggle, the dog managed to scramble out of the river, pulling its shivering, dripping body onto the bank. It stood there, panting heavily, water streaming from its coat, a miserable and pathetic figure. As it looked back at the now calm river, the full weight of its foolishness crashed down upon it. There was no other dog. There was no bigger bone. There had only ever been its own reflection. It had been tricked by its own image and, more importantly, by its own greed. It had sacrificed a certain real prize for the sake of an imaginary, unattainable one. The hunger in its belly was now matched by the emptiness of its loss. The juicy bone, the anticipated feast, was gone forever, lying at the bottom of the stream. All that remained was the bitter taste of regret and the harsh, cold reality of its situation. The dog was left hungry, wet, and profoundly sadder, but also wiser. It had learned a difficult but unforgettable lesson about the nature of desire and the value of contentment. The moral, the central lesson of the dog and its reflection is that greed can lead to loss. By desiring more than what is sufficient, one risks losing what they already possess. The story teaches that being content and not letting greed dictate one's actions is a path to true happiness and possession.